Carl, welcome to the Gauntlet. Are you ready to face your fears?
Uh, I guess I must be.
Round one. Do you want to talk about music, economics, or cosmology?
I'm not an expert on any of those subjects.
Oh, doesn't bode well.
I guess we'll go for cosmology.
Here we go. The universe began with a big bang. The cosmological principle is unjustified, or the anthropic principle is a cop-out. So if you don't know what the cosmological or anthropic principle is, I can give you a quick definition if you want.
Yes, please.
The cosmological principle is the idea that the universe is the same everywhere, wherever you go. If you travel off in any direction from the Earth, as far as you go, you still have like the same constant of gravity and various other things.
The same matter, the same forces.
Yeah. The anthropic principle, this is fun. You probably will recognize it once I've described it. The idea is that because we are here, we're observing it, and that explains some stuff. So, for example, how come we just happen to be on a planet that is able to support life? And the anthropic principle would say, well, the reason we're observing this planet is because we are life. And so although it's very unlikely a random planet would support life, it's very likely that the planet that we are on supports life, because otherwise we wouldn't be observing anything.
Yeah.
So do any of those take your fancy? Or would you like to re-roll? And
No. I'll go for the anthropic principle. It seems inevitable that we have to come to the conclusion that the anthropic principle is justified and valid, because we are the planet with life on it. We have this habit in science fiction of assuming there can be various other forms of life, but the thing is, there seems to be no evidence that there's anything other than the kind of life that we are familiar with. And if that kind of life can only come to being in a very limited set of circumstances, for example, you need a planet with lots of water, you need a certain temperature in the Goldilocks zone, you need a certain percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere, whatever the option, whatever the requirements are. I'm no scientist. Then we look at it as being fortuitous that this would be the case, but I mean, it's inevitable that life would end up on a planet that had the prerequisites for life, if life is actually only possible in a certain way and through a fairly narrow band of circumstances. And there's probably somewhere on the other side of the galaxy carbon-based life forms that not necessarily look like us, but function probably in a vaguely similar way, using the same principles, using the same materials, looking around going, well, I guess we're the only life in the universe, and I guess this is how life must be. That's my argument.
I like to think on that alternative planet, millions of light years away, they're also running a YouTube channel with a similar discussion and pondering on our existence.
Well, there's nothing to say they aren't.
The anthropic principle gets applied to how come we're on this planet rather than any of the other planets. But of course, it also applies to universes, because there's these observations of things that make life possible anywhere. I mentioned the gravitational constant. I think that's one of those, that if the gravitational constant was too high, then you wouldn't get the formation of planets at all. So how does the universe happen to fit in the very small band of parameters that support life? And people will say the anthropic principle is also an explanation for why the universe supports life. The reason that the reason I said it was potentially a cop-out, these statements don't represent my opinion necessarily, but if I'm arguing against you here, imagine there was 12 people lined up with like a firing squad, and they were going to shoot you, and the person counted down 3, 2, 1, fire, and you heard all the guns going off, and then a couple of seconds later you were still alive. Now, the fact that you're still alive is surprising. The fact that you're observing your survival of the firing squad has to be because you're still alive. But the question of why, how come the firing squad didn't kill you, is still a question worthy of an answer. And so even if the anthropic principle tells you something, it doesn't remove all the questions. And I think there's still this question of, well, how come there are even universes being generated in the first place? How come the existence of life is within the broad sweep of possible universes,
Totally valid questions. Ones that I don't have an answer to, obviously. But no, you're absolutely right. It doesn't erase any further questions or anything like that. But there's this kind of, I feel like it's almost like begging the question when we say, well, why is it here and not somewhere else? It's like, well, this is the form that life seems to take in this universe. And it's not to say that we're important because of it or something like that. I'm not trying to say that we're the center of the universe or anything like that, or the universe is designed for us, but it's in the same way that every wheel happens to be round, because that's how the thing works. It's not a coincidence that every comb has teeth in the same way. There's a brilliant conspiracy theory in the best parts of the internet that suggests that there was a global civilization once, because actually, if you look around all around the world, everyone has combs that are basically the same. Therefore, it's a shared technology. And it's like, that is possible. Or human hair basically works in the same way everywhere. And I think that is the more plausible reason why I don't think it's a cop-out.
Is this a parody of because stepped pyramids exist all over the world?
Yes,
therefore,
yes.
Right.
It happens to be that actually it's the most stable way of building things in stone. Yes.
Yeah, so the anthropic principle, of course, comes up in arguments about the origin of life, as in, was it is our existence, our consciousness, evidence of a supernatural designer, or can we use other, for example, statistical explanations, scientific explanations, and come to the same conclusion?
Is it a mechanical occurrence?
Yeah,
which is a good question.
And I guess the specific question is not just can we come up with an explanation, because I think it's perfectly reasonable to say you can come up with a scientific explanation of any phenomenon. You can come up with a theological explanation. Of course, if you've got the power of God, it's not going to be difficult to come up with a way that God could have done a thing. You've got to figure out, given the evidence we have, which is the most likely explanation. And there's an interesting idea that if we run the simulation of randomly generating universes that match our observations, and then looking at the distribution of what those universes look like, the majority of them are not actually fully fledged real universes. The majority of them just happen to flicker a single brain into existence for a millisecond, long enough that the brain can make a conscious observation like we are doing right now before dissolving into nothingness. So you get to this really interesting philosophical conclusion that the most likely reality is actually that we are but a momentary fluctuation in the space-time continuum.
Possibly.
That all of our memories are just illusions.
Yeah. I don't buy into the sort of idealist view of the universe. I think it's probably nonsense. But the problem is, if you're trapped in the mechanistic universe, then ultimately everything is actually determined. And so it seems to be inevitable that in a mechanistic universe, life would arise, given enough space and time. If life is a product of natural forces acting upon one another, well, if you have a large enough experiment in the universe, then it has to arise at some point. Otherwise, you are essentially admitting that actually things, it's not that things mechanically are necessary. It could be otherwise that gravity operates in a certain way. It could be otherwise that, I don't know, the particle forces operate in the way they do, and etc. Cetera,
Hmm.
etc. So you are kind of the problem with the mechanical universe. You're committed to a deterministic universe, and ultimately, no one really feels like they live in a deterministic universe. Everyone actually
Hmm.
feels as if they have agency, particularly moral agency. Because of course, if we are living in a deterministic universe and actually we don't really have moral agency, well, then crime and punishment actually become not even irrelevant, immoral themselves, because actually
Mm.
you were just punishing someone for a fate that was set for them that they actually had no choice in making, and therefore were punishing people for things they didn't do, which means that all of our notions of morality and justice go straight out the window. So even if it is true that we live in a deterministic universe, we have to live like we don't. So I guess
Uh-huh.
that opens the door to the theological questions, doesn't it?
Well, maybe so. I actually am one of the strange Christians who doesn't believe in free will, which puts me in a
Right, okay.
really
I've
odd
never heard of
box.
those.
Yes, I remember going to a talk at uni once, which was put on by Atheist Sock, and their talk was all about how free will doesn't exist. And at the
Yeah.
end of the talk, the speaker was like, "Well, does anybody still disagree with me after my talk?" And I was sitting there as a Christian, raring to like stand up and have a big argument. But I was like, "Well, yeah, but I already agree with you. I actually thought your presentation was correct, but I don't require free will as my explanation for God."
The,
This.
yeah. The thing is, the problem with a lot of these questions is it seems that our term free will is essentially analogous to a scientist saying, well, that bit's magic. What they're saying is this is an area we simply don't understand. And I think that both
Interesting.
the materialistic and the theistic position has to come down to this point. And this is why you have phrases like, well, God works in mysterious ways. If all of the universe is part of a divine plan, that you can't possibly really think that you have free will, because, of course, what you would be saying is there are outcomes to your actions that God himself can't predict, which surely you can't believe.
Right.
And
Right.
if you're an atheist and believe in a purely mechanistic universe, what you're saying is things operate. And if I had sufficient scientific capacity and understanding and the ability to measure everything and a sufficiently large database, I'd be able to catalog absolutely everything in the universe. And actually, the universe would be predictable. It's just
Mm.
the limit to my own technological capability that makes it mysteriously seem as if things are random or can't be predicted in advance.
Hmm.
So you're on both sides. You're committed to this kind of deterministic paradigm, um, and I generally kind of hate questions of free will, especially when you get to like Schopenhauer wrote a famous essay on free will. The won awards, and he basically said, "No, obviously not. What do you mean free will? We're trapped in bodies, and bodies are material things, and we have requirements and demands placed on us. So, of course, the will isn't free. It's completely confined in its flesh prison." And it's like, okay, you're kind of missing the point, though. The point isn't, is the consciousness separate from any physical demands on it? The point is, did we have a choice? Could we have actually chosen otherwise when we made a
Hmm.
decision? And for example, I've noticed in the past couple of months, I've been slacking on my diet. And so today, I did not have any chocolate after dinner. And my God, could so easily have chosen otherwise. I'm
Yeah.
sat here
Yeah.
angry at not having any chocolate this evening, but God damn it, I'm not having that chocolate. And so I think that is a demonstration enough that we do have free will. Not that this is really connected to the anthropic principle so much. We're a bit off
No, we're off
subject,
topic. But
but
to be honest,
I think it's
the
important,
the framework of the game show is merely a thinly veiled excuse for starting some interesting conversations. So
which I think is a good idea.
let's not get too hung up on it. But just as a last thought on free will,
Hmm.
I think there's a belief that people are only culpable for uncaused moral decisions, which is partly why when people when people find out that, for example, a murderer had a difficult childhood, then they then think, okay, well, we should let them off. And I think actually having a chain of causes that led up to your decision doesn't actually make you any less culpable for the thing that you did. It might be something that you want to think about and address on a societal level, but I think you have to be held accountable for your actions.
The problem is, there is an argument that there is a level of exculpatory, I don't even know how to frame it, factors whenever any of these things happen. I mean, you know it's wrong to steal from a shop, but if the kid had gone to school and had not been given a packed lunch that day or something, and he stole from the shop, you'd be like, well, you can't blame him. He was, he hadn't eaten all day. So even though it is wrong in the absolute to steal from the shop, it is normal and natural, I think, for people to find these sorts of things to soften the crime. But I'm actually with you on this one. Too bad, frankly. Can't be dealing with it. Can't be having it. Can't be soft on it. You commit the crime, therefore you need to do the time.
Well, I'm going to give you 11 points for the first round. So
out of what?
It's not out of anything.
Oh. Okay, well, I hope that's a good score.
Yeah, you'll have to just discover over the course of the show whether that's a good score or not. Ethics, history, or metaphysics?
Ooh, I'll go. These are the subjects I'm actually good at. I'll have to come up at once. I'll go for I like all of these. Goddamn. Go for a history one.
All right. Historical materialism is the most explanatory framework. National histories are entirely constructed narratives. Or pandemics have been pivotal in shaping human history.
I'll go for natural histories are entirely constructed narratives.
And are you arguing in favor or against?
In favor, but it's a good thing.
All right, take it away. Let's hear this.
All narratives are entirely constructed. That's what a narrative is. Narratives don't just fall out of the ether. We, as human beings, choose events or circumstances or ethical situations, morals, whatever it is. We choose to value the things that we connect together. Because you could create a narrative out of absolutely anything. The narrative of I got up, I had a shower, I went to work, I eventually came down and I sat in this chair. That is a narrative because these are things that happen. But I'm also leaving out a load of other things that concurrently happen during the day because they just don't seem important to how I came to be on this podcast with you, right? But a load of other things obviously happened. And so any amount of storytelling includes things that we feel are valuable to whatever the topic is and excludes, which not necessarily maliciously or anything like that, not even necessarily through ignorance, just through irrelevance. It tends to leave out other things which are not central to the point that's being made, because the narrative really is a rhetorical argument. And obviously you can only include so many things in the argument that you were trying to make as to why something is as it is. And so it is true that national histories are entirely constructed narratives because every narrative is constructed, and any understanding of a historical event is couched in a story because that's how humans understand everything about the world that humans understand. They tell themselves a story because a story is how we represent time in the way that we understand the world around us. Point A, point B, and point C, and we got from one to the other through various means. And if we didn't have these narratives, then we would have to compress everything down into just we don't even have a way of conceiving of it. And it comes to literally everything that we tell each other. Like a Wikipedia article is a narrative about an event, even though it claims to be just listing different separate events, but they're always in, for example, chronological order. Why would you not have it in chronological order? Well, it doesn't make any sense not to do so. So the point being that any narrative like this is it is constructed, but I think there's an important way of remembering that it's not constructed by one person. What you are dealing with is the inherited group mind of a people when you look at national history, and what they, assuming that they're telling their own story, what they remember through the generations, the work of many hands about themselves. And so there is no single author, usually, to a historical narrative, but these are the things that the people themselves thought were important and spoke to the ethical norms and the who is it that, I can't remember who it was who says that a people, I think it's probably Hegel or Nietzsche or something. A people is a, I think it's Hegel, is a shared moral community, right? That's what a people is. And the historical narratives that the shared moral community have and carry with them inform what they were and pass the morality, the ethics from generation to generation. And so the things that they value, the things that they put into the narrative, tell you everything about the worldview and the morality of those people. And so they do it on purpose. It is entirely true, but it's also a good thing, because part of the historical narrative is to explain why we are as we are. And the best example of this is, of course, the Germans. Why the Germans are as they are? Well, they've got a massive narrative in the middle of the 20th century that tells the Germans why they have to, for example, accept infinity migrants or be forever without an army or whatever it is. They carry this narrative with them, and it teaches them about themselves, for good or for bad. And so, yes, they are constructed, but this is normal. It's a good thing. Sorry, it's not happening, and it's a good thing now.
And it's a good thing, yeah.
It's a good thing, and it's almost, I would suggest it's probably impossible to have a history without a constructed narrative.
Which three events would you pick, or stories, to define British national history?
It depends whose perspective you're defining it from. If we were defining it from the point of the Welsh, you would probably have the Romans, you'd probably have the English, the Normans attacking, and then you'd probably have the formation of Britain. But if it's from the English perspective, you'd probably have it from Hengist and Horsa, then Alfred the Great, and then, I mean, you'd probably go 1066 if you only had three. Then again, and then the formation of the British Empire, probably, or some major event there, like the Napoleonic Wars, something like that.
What was the first one that you mentioned for English?
Oh, the arrival of the first Anglo-Saxons in Britain, Hengist and Horsa.
I don't even know about them.
It's wild.
I've got some homework to do.
But isn't that wild? But you don't know. Betrayed by Vortigern and stuff. How is it that the English don't know that? Like,
I know.
we act as if that like this hasn't been like a part of English mythology since time immemorial, but it has.
I'm fairly sure I've never been taught about Hengist and Horsa in my life, so shame on the British education system.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you 14 points for that.
What I love about that is how not arbitrary it is.
It's not arbitrary in the slightest. That number was written in the universe.
Yeah. Determined.
There's nothing to... Yes. So round 3, cinema and theatre, world affairs, or epistemology.
I could do...
See, there's some good rounds.
There are. I like these. I like these rounds. Let's go for epistemology.
Great. We can never be certain of anything. We can never know anything. Or radical skepticism is self-defeating.
Interesting. What's the differentiation between being certain of things and knowing things?
I guess, well, in a way, you should be the one answering the questions.
I should. Okay, well, I'll take. I would say never be certain of anything.
Isn't it? Not knowledge is when you believe something and it is actually
Justified
true.
true belief.
Justified true belief. So, but you could think that something is the case, but not be very sure of yourself. Whereas certainty implies like
true.
not only do I think this is true, I know it.
Then,
All right.
technically, this is just not true. We can be certain of logical a priori beliefs. 2 plus 2 is definitely 4 in all times and all places, with no caveats. It's just always the case. So we can be certain of things. When it comes to contingent things that are in the universe, there are two philosophers generally have two different standards, which is fallible beliefs and infallible beliefs. Things that are fallibly believed obviously might otherwise be true, be untrue, but infallible beliefs, of course, have to be true. And then you end up in quite murky territory, because you end up with the sort of radical skepticism of the Cartesian, saying, well, what if the entire world is actually just my perceptions are completely befuddled by some demon who is playing tricks on me? It's like, well, I can't rule that out, obviously, because the only thing I have to go on is my sense data from the world. And if a demon actually has control of my senses and is feeding me all this sense data, then I could never know. But the point is, I could never know. So the question is there any evidence to suggest that? And the answer is no, obviously. Why would they? No, I mean, and you might say, well, what could the evidence be? Well, incongruities in whatever I'm being told, right? Like, I don't know, I haven't got an example. But there doesn't appear to be any obvious incongruity that implies there's some fallible puppet master pulling the strings above us or anything like that, or, messing with our senses or something. We all seem to be experiencing the same shared reality. But technically, we can't be 100% certain of anything contingent about the world, because we are using fallible senses, and because it is possible that it is otherwise. Whereas something like something is deductively true a priori is always the case. So there are things we can be certain of. They're just not real things. They're not physical things. Anything physical, technically, no, but you're at a level of autism at that point that has no bearing on the real world whatsoever. And in every situation you come to, the level of knowledge that you have about the world will essentially be certain. So, but technically, when it comes to contingent things, no.
Even the example of mathematics that you brought up, it's often struck me that the only way that you can assert that a mathematical theorem is valid is because you read it through, checked it carefully, talked with your mate who's a really good mathematician about it. All of these things could be tricks of your memory. So you're actually still stuck in skepticism.
Not really, because the thing is that the thing is about, say, mathematical theorems is they're definitionally true, right? They're definitionally true because we define one as being a single instance of something, and two as being two instances of something. And so in all times and all places, because of the definition we're using, it will absolutely be certain that 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, blah, blah, blah. So actually we can be certain of that because we've captured the game before it's even begun. But when it comes to just checking the real world around us, well, no, technically it could be different, but there's literally no reason to think it. So,
but even though it is it is the case that mathematical theorems have a truth that is a priori, we as humans have to exist within time and have to check proofs one step at a time, and therefore we absolutely rely on working memory at least.
Not for mathematics. Mathematics is a great example because it's calculable. The syllogism is whatever, however you're calculating it. The truth of the conclusion is derived from the premises. So it is contained within the premises that it will end up at a certain truth. So actually, you don't need your memory or anything like that. And this is why calculators work. They don't have a memory, but they will always calculate the same numbers because they are definitionally this, that, and then they will come to a certain conclusion, no matter whether you like it or not. So the 2 + 2 = 5 crew, they're eternally destroyed on this point. They've got no wiggle room. They really don't. There's nothing that they can do on this point other than expose themselves as frauds.
What do you think of pragmatism? So I feel like Jordan Peterson is kind of verging in that direction, where he, if you ask him, does he believe in the existence of God, to pick up that old canard again, he will say, I act as though I do believe that he exists. And there's something quite interesting about that epistemic route to me, that actually you only define things as something that's true if it's something that you're going to practically behave differently because of that belief. And it does, if there was a true belief that would affect your life, but you had no way of verifying it, but practically you were going to act as if it was true, that's equivalent to saying that it is true.
I don't think it is equivalent.
No?
It might have the same consequence, but I don't think that's an equivalence. Because I think there's something genuinely important about living an authentic and sincere life. And there's something about living in this fog of insincerity that I think is probably damaging to the soul over a long enough period of time. It's not that Jordan Peterson is wrong, that if people live Christian lives, then they seem to be good and just and righteous people. That seems to be the experience I've seen from every Christian I've ever met. The question is, can people really be persuaded to live good lives by a Christian standard through inauthentic belief? And I would suggest no. I don't think actually inauthentic beliefs are very persuasive. And if you say, well, look, we just end up with good results if we do it, so why don't we just pretend like we believe in God? That feels quite gross to me. There's something about that I just... It's also sad, right? Like, this is the sort of Nietzschean death of God and the lamenting madman saying, well, what are we going to do about this? And... well, we'll just pretend then. It's like, really? I mean, there's a kind of rigidity to it. There's a set jaw. There's a kind of tension in the eyes. Like, no, we have to. It's like, yeah, we do. And I worry about that. Whereas when people are living within authentic and sincere beliefs, actually, they're very robust, and they're living like at the front of their life moving forward, rather than in a second order looking at the front of their life and saying, oh yeah, no, I've got to maneuver that, I've got to make sure I'm living in accordance with this pretense. And again, it's this kind of postmodern cynical way of being a human being. And I think I would rather be in like you're not in the driver's seat of your own life, right? Like you're not in the cockpit. And I think that actually that's not healthy. And I don't think it takes much for someone to say, well, you know what? I don't care. Actually, I don't care if I'm not living a good life according to Christian standards, because you don't believe and I don't believe. And this was all a charade. And actually, I'm going to do something completely abominable. And you know what will happen to me? Nothing. Because there's no God, as you've just told me. And so I think that this is something that couldn't hold even for a few minutes. And I think it wouldn't take long for someone who doesn't buy into this. Because the problem with this as well is the fact that you're admitting there is an alternative, right? You're admitting that there's an alternative belief system that actually is more valid. You just like the results of this one. It's like, okay. But I think people have to live in a kind of true belief. Wow.
Well, I'm going to give you 12 for that round.
That was good.
It was very good. Well, let me say that 14 is the highest score I've ever given, and I've only ever given it once before. So if you want the scoring system to seem less arbitrary, then you're actually acing it.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
Round 4. Psychology, elite theory, or theology?
Oh, God. Let's go for psychology. Something I haven't done since A-level.
IQ tests are meaningless. Nature is significantly more influential than nurture. Or individuals lose their moral compass in group settings.
Well, because Hope Not Hate are currently digging up past quotes from people, I think I'll skip the first one.
Right. Fair.
Yeah.
Just wait till you see the questions for the next round.
I'll go for nature is significantly more influential than nurture.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with that, because the thing is, especially on the online right, is that they very much are genetic determinists, and it is not untrue that the inherent nature of a thing, of course, determines, say, the box in which everything can happen. For example, I'm 5'9". I'm very average height. This is the example I always give. I was never going to be a basketball player. I can't dunk. And so there is a limit, a hard limit that nature imposes on me there. But also,
ironically, you did kick off your career with dunking on people.
Well, yeah, but not physically on the basketball court. But when it comes to behaviors, and I think that's really what people are thinking of when it comes to this, I'm not sure. And I think that actually the human soul is a lot more malleable than people realize. Although, I have to say, I'm not saying that nature isn't important. I have 4 kids, and they're very different from one another. And you can see that there are some things that are just inborn, that built in to their characters. But I think that's what actually a good education, being well raised by your parents, is all about. And so I'm not saying that nature isn't important. It is. But I also think the way that you are raised, the nurture, is also very important, and definitely has a significant influence on the outcomes that you experience in your life. Because again, one of the things that definitely the online right gets hung up on are IQ tests, which are not a metric of good or evil, which is important to remember as well. I've met many people who I don't think are the brightest, but who I do know are good people and do the right thing because they were raised to do the right thing. But I also know that, or I strongly suspect, that if they had not been raised right, they would not be very well self-governing. So, and I think this is something that historically has always been known, right? I mean, it goes right the way back to Aristotle. It's well known that the way a person is habituated as they grow up is a massive influence on the kind of character they inherit as an adult. And basically, it was seen that when you were an adult, if you had not been raised right, that was it, And so it doesn't matter what you did after that, and it would be a great strength of mind, an effort of mind to change your behavior as an adult. So raising children right was an incredibly important thing in the pre-modern world. So I wouldn't, I mean, how to frame it? It's not that nature isn't important. It is very important, but also it's not immutable, and people are also formed by the experiences that make them into the person they become.
It feels like it's 50-50. There's contributions from both.
When I did psychology, when I was 17 or whatever in A-level, it was something like 45-55 was the split they gave it back then.
Interesting.
55 nature, 45 nurture.
Right.
The problem though is that it's easy for me to say, well, nurture is important, yeah. And if you look at, say, a system's collapse in the form of, say, the welfare state, and saying, well, how can we get that level of, the proper level of nurture back? It's like, well, I'm not saying that we can. It could be that that some people are just condemned to follow their natures because we've been irresponsible.
Well, sadly, I have to bring another round to the end and also give it a score, which is a horribly ungallant way to continue a conversation. But there you are, 13.
Better than I was expecting.
Round 5. Technology, natural sciences, or Christology?
Sorry, Christology. So this is a study of Christ, is it?
Correct.
Right. I'm not a Christologist. I'm not a scientist either. I don't really think I call myself a technologist, but we'll give technology.
Silicon Valley is a transhumanist cult. Virtual reality will pacify the oppressed masses, or blockchain technology is important.
Well, I don't know anything about blockchain technology.
Well, I'll give you my answer on that one. It's not important.
Is it not? Yeah, I'll take your word.
Vastly overrated. People started saying that the only useful thing blockchain has given us is cryptocurrency, and I'm not convinced cryptocurrency is useful. So,
I'll go for virtual reality will pacify the masses. Well, the oppressed masses, which implies that they are oppressed. But the problem is, I don't think they think of themselves as oppressed, and I don't think they understand that what we would consider to be oppression is their good life. Actually, I hate to get a bit Brave New World about this, but to render, remember, half of people are below average IQ. And so it's easy, because what I've noticed in our spaces, there are a lot of 130 plus IQ Anglos. And we have this habit of universalizing ourselves, which is how we ended up in liberalism. And one thing that we forget is that not everyone is a 130 IQ Anglo. And so
interesting.
We aren't actually, I don't want to sound too paternalistic about this, but actually there are some people for whom the Dino life is actually the apex of what they could be reasonably expected to achieve. And they themselves are happy and fulfilled living that life. And so virtual reality to them isn't a form of oppression. It is actually I don't want to sound condescending. It is the reward for being virtuous that they get. They're not looking for something higher because they are actually physically restrained in the fact that their IQ is lower than some but higher than others, right? So I don't want to turn this into a kind of Brave New World scenario either, but this does seem to be the nature of things. That the bell curve is as it is for everyone, and some people fall on one side, some people fall on the other side, but the majority are somewhere in the middle. And so you could substitute virtual reality for the theater, or for beer, or for hanging out in a pub, having a chat with your mates, whatever it is. The thing that makes life worth living, when you're having fun doing it after you've done your day's work, that's not actually a tool of oppression to a lot of people, actually. And so I don't know if the masses are oppressed. There are definitely arguments that they are, but I don't really agree with that. Those ones. And also, we're kind of another thing as well. We're kind of wandering into Marcuse's one-dimensional man scenario, where it's like, look, the guy who drinks his beer, puts on his VR goggles, and then plays VR games for a couple of hours a night before he goes to bed. He's been made by the capitalist system. It's like kind of, but he's the same man in every system. there's always that guy who is mediocre and doesn't aspire to more, is just wants to have some happiness at the end of his day. And actually, it feels weirdly cruel to deny him that and say, no, you have to now act like a 130 IQ angler. It's like, but he's a normal dude. Let him get on with his life, you know?
I suppose partly what I'm wondering about is if the VR headset actually results in the person putting up with significantly worse material conditions in the real world than basically anyone through history has ever had, and that they are pacified into an existence that's much less real.
That is definitely a possibility.
Going down to the pub and having your pint with your mates is more real because there's the pub and there's the pint and there's the mates. Whereas what if you literally just live in a padded cell and you've got your
You're
virtual
living in the pod
mates
and you're
with your virtual
your
virtual pub, your virtual beer.
Yeah. I'm not saying that isn't bad, obviously, but also these things are relative as well. The guy who the sort of, you know, the guy with the testosterone of a 95-year-old man from 50 years ago, who's afraid of going into the wilderness because leaving the city makes him afraid. He won't consider this a form of oppression. He'll consider it a form of liberation because of what he is. And so it's not the future I want, but he will think of himself as being oppressed if you don't let him have these things. Now, I just want to be clear. I'm totally in favor of oppressing these people. So, yeah, no, ban it. I'm totally in favor of oppressing that guy by depriving him of his VR headset.
Where's your paternalism gone? Can we need to inject him with some testosterone, throw him in the woods?
Yes, bad luck to that guy. But this is just what I do for my own son, right?
Sure.
But he will view me as oppressing him, whereas I will view myself as liberating him.
Yes, I see.
And so it'll definitely pacify the masses, and they won't even think of themselves as oppressed. That's the problem. And the thing is, I'm not even sure that we can say that we're right to say that they're oppressed, because I obviously do think that they are, but like they will turn to us and say, well, look at the hardship of your own existence or something, and I'll say, well, the hardship's good. The hardship is good for us, and the fact that you're avoiding the hardship is part of your oppression. But I won't have any objective standard by which to give him, because anything that I held up as a standard of good or bad, he would have already the inverse as a standard of good and bad in his mind. And we see this already with the leftists. All the leftist goony beard men and soy boys, they already view our standards as evil, and we view their standards as evil, and vice versa.
Wasn't it Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living? I think like these like large number of people that you're talking about, they are not self-examining their existence. Like they're just plowing ahead. But then
sorry, just to interrupt that. You know what? Yeah. I don't know if that's true. I think there are lots of weak soy-wristed. You've seen the meme of the robot jar opener. Have you seen that? It's like,
let me look it up.
Open the jar for me. I'm too weak. I think that a lot of those are really highly educated, actually, and they will have examined the world and gone, yeah, okay, that's all and good for you because you're a normal man with the normal grip strength of a man, so you can open the jar on your own. But I have been cursed by being a soy-wristed goony beard man. And I've examined my life, and actually the struggle to get even halfway to where a normal man is worse than just putting on the VR goggles.
The flip side of the argument that Socrates is making, I think, is made in The Man from Underground by Dostoevsky, which is I highly recommend. And the protagonist, at one point, is lamenting that he is so deep thinking that he's never going to be capable of being a man of action, and he kind of valorizes the hero who can just act in any given situation. There's no in between the in the world, and action is needed, and they just do it. And he's always going to be arm's length removed from his own life because of how considerate he has to be over everything that happens.
But also there's the kind of curse of Jordan Peterson, like we just discussed. The life that is over-examined therefore becomes sort of second order. And now you're living your own life insincerely because, okay, you may have rationally deconstructed your Christian beliefs or whatever it is, but you didn't have anything solid with which to replace them. And so now you're living the examined life in the back seat. Right, and so you can't be the man of action, like you were saying. So I think there is an argument to be made for the unexamined life, the life of heroes. I mean, how much did Alexander the Great spend examining his own life as he was traversing across Persia? You know, it can't have been that much. Probably a bit too busy.
But perhaps, although I bet there was long periods of marching, and they didn't have iPods back in those days. There probably was just built into the fabric of reality. You know, we at the moment have technology that means we can fill every minute of every day with quote unquote productive hustle culture meetings, and I don't know if that's healthy. I mean,
like Alexander wasn't employing critical theory against his charge against Darius, was he? Yeah, he wasn't like, you know what? Am I really?
Well, leave it to Netflix to put that subplot into their next biopic.
But he wasn't second guessing himself.
No,
and so he knew what he was doing and why he was doing it. So
well, it was that single-minded focus and confidence is probably one of the very characteristic traits of the Carlylean great men of history, that they just plow into their destiny, and probably stuff that would have stopped us comes new things come into their lives every day, and they just waltz across it as if it didn't even happen.
I'm endlessly fascinated with Hannibal because I just don't understand how you get 100,000 mercenaries to cross the Alps in winter to invade Rome. I just don't know how that happens. What is in their minds?
Right.
Like they can't be examining much at all. It's like, the Romans, the guys who beat us in the last war, we're just going to march into Italy and we're just going to march on Rome. I mean, come on. I mean, it just sounds preposterous, right? It's just are we all going to get killed if we do that? And Hannibal's like, no, trust me, bro, it'll be fine. And it's like, what? With the elephants across the Alps in the winter? Are you mad? It's like, no, it'll be fine, trust me. And so it's just like, there can't have been that much examining going on. But I don't think that you can say those men's lives were not worth living. I mean, Jesus, what an adventure to have gone on. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows? Who knows on that one?
Well, look at this. 14 again.
That's fantastic.
And it brings us to our final round.
Oh, God.
Literature, software and mathematics, or eschatology.
I'm terrible at all of those subjects.
Well,
I actually have not read much literature.
Okay.
What sort of thing is software and mathematics?
We can have a look if you like, and then if you
I'm not
if
being
you don't
given a C+ test, am I?
No, none of the questions are like quiz questions, are they? They're all quite philosophical. No. One day, all code will be written in JavaScript. Open source should be considered harmful. And this is probably the most nerdy one. Is about Turing completeness. Yeah. I don't think anyone's taken me up on software, which is probably because they know that that's kind of my specialist subject.
Right. Yeah, let's go back. Let's not do that.
Judged harshly. I'm just gonna rewind. If you'll excuse me, I'm. By the way, this quiz is being powered by my own software.
Oh, is it?
One of the downsides is
and now it's broken.
It's broken. No, I've destroyed it.
Sorry, tell me about your speciality a bit more.
Yeah. Well, this is a classic, like carpenters living in a room with broken tables and stuff. I'm going to read you 3.
Okay.
Tell you what, you regretted not being able to have the option of more of the earlier rounds, right? You wanted either metaphysics or
I don't need to change
economics.
change the.
Well,
format.
since I'm going to read you the questions, it's as easy for me to give you.
Well, let's do the
world affairs or eschatology. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, but
eschatology is the study of the end of the world, and then the other. Okay, you're going to go for eschatology.
I don't know anything about the end of the world.
You don't know about the end of the world? Well, this
Not
is
much.
most unfortunate. Okay. I'll read you them, and then I'll copy them onto the screen in a second.
Okay.
So, one is the end times are coming. One is modern Israel is relevant to end times prophecy. And then the last one is the Antichrist is a specific individual.
I think I'll go for the end times are coming.
Okay, let's hear it. Do you think they are?
They always are, because nothing lasts forever. But the question is the end times for who?
Ooh.
Because, I mean, it's very easy to be living in the end of the Western Roman Empire and go, well, the end times are upon us. It's like, yeah, for you. It'd be very easy to be living in Baghdad as the Mongol host has turned up and be like, well, the end times are here. Yeah, for you. But is it the end times for the universe? Is it everything that is going to be destroyed by God? No, obviously not. Life will go on, probably. Assuming the entire world isn't scoured clean in a nuclear holocaust or something. But even then, that's not going to destroy all life on Earth. It'll just be sentient life. So yeah, no, I don't think the end times are coming, but the fall of civilizations is something that happens with alarming regularity throughout the historical record, and we are a civilization. So it's entirely possible it'll be ours, especially given the way we're treating it. So yes and no, I guess, is the answer to that one.
Is it possible that we've somehow hit a tipping point and this civilization will never collapse?
No, I don't think so. It's hard to imagine that there could be such a thing as a civilization that doesn't collapse, because civilizations are subject to historical forces and manned by people. And this means it could be a massive famine that happens at just the wrong political time, something like that. Who knows? Blah, blah, blah. You know, any number of confluence of events that lead to what we consider to be the collapse of civilization. It's a foreign invasion, perhaps, or something like that. And eventually we are talking about ourselves, well, not we, but someone else is talking about ourselves in the future, like the Bell Beaker people, or the Babylonians, or, you know, whoever. And the people that they're talking about just no longer exist. I mean, you know, God knows how many nations have risen and fallen throughout the course of human history, and before recorded history. So before you even know they existed, we have no idea. But it's probably untold thousands.
How many humans do you think there will be if we skip forward 500 years?
God, I don't know.
Have you heard of the doomsday argument?
Is it a Malthusian argument?
It's well, the formulation I know is much more recent than Malthus.
Right, okay.
Let me tell you it,
Yeah.
because it's really cool. And if you haven't come across this before, then I think you'll enjoy. So, so the question is, how many humans are left to come in the future? So let's imagine that we have a number that we know we were the human number 70 trillion, let's say.
Yeah.
Does that represent, like, I'm the first 1% of humans ever, or the first 0.001% of humans who will ever live. How could we ever know? And of course, we can't know. But the doomsday argument says that imagine that you have a big bag full of balls. You don't know how many balls there are in total. You have to guess how many balls there are in total. You've got no information at all, except that somebody pulls out one ball and the ball has a number on it, and the balls are all numbered sequentially. What's your best guess? And the answer is you should double whatever number is on the ball, and that's mathematically the best guess of how many, which stands to reason, right? Because if the ball you picked out was number 10, it's probably the bag's got maybe 20 balls in it. It's less likely that the bag has got 70 trillion balls in it, because it's so unlikely you would have got ball 10, right?
Yeah.
Now, we know that there hasn't been, well, let's say we're reasonably confident there hasn't been more than 70 trillion humans, and therefore we can look forwards and say it's reasonable for us to assume there's only going to be 70 trillion more humans ever, because we are just one random ball picked out of the bag. And given that population numbers are going up, that actually means we are way closer to the end of humanity. And that's why it's called the doomsday argument, because chronologically we're therefore like in the last days.
I think it's more likely that we can. I think it's more that we can point to factors that are leading to a population collapse, and so we may well be in the last days. I don't think we need to take such an abstract position on it. I would say, at least for our civilizations, we're probably in the last days. I mean, nobody wants to have this conversation, but it may well be that we just have to ban birth control at some point, and the civilizations with birth control just die.
Very Catholic.
It's not something that I'm. It's not something I cherish having say, 'cause it's not something I'd really thought about. But it's becoming increasingly apparent that just widespread access to birth control is allowing women to leap off of the biological destiny that they inherit as women. And those civilizations that have access to it are just cratering in their population levels. This is not good. And those civilizations that either don't have it or forbid it are doing very well population-wise. And so, well, the future belongs to the people who show up for it. And if half of our civilization says, you know what, we're just not going to bother, then the civilization does collapse, and they will be remembered as a very strange and foolish civilization that chose to end themselves out of convenience, which may well have been what happened to the Romans. The Romans used to have a plant called silphium, which acted like a contraceptive, only grew in North Africa and Cyrene, and they couldn't cultivate it. But what they did is end up harvesting it to extinction. And so this may well have been responsible for a massive decline in the population of Romans in Rome, leading, of course, to the rise of foreigners and to the eventual collapse of the Roman state. Just saying, we're governed by Rishi Sunak. Who knows? who knows whether there's a cycle at play here or not? But it is just becoming. I saw a video today of a woman. I think Ian Mars Chung shared it, of a woman saying, "Well, you know, we women are just going to not have children because we're not happy with the world you've built. We're not happy with the state of the world, and therefore we're just not going to bother until you treat us better." And it's like, okay, then what you're going to get is patriarchy, because, I mean, you know, our civilization will collapse. All of the morality that we upheld to make this civilization what it is will collapse with it. And someone else from somewhere else, possibly not capable of making birth control, will turn up, and they will continue to breed as humans have always done, and not even know why you took the actions you took, because you'll be completely forgotten. And that's the future your hubris and selfishness is condemning us to. So okay, well, that's brilliant, isn't it? And so we would have to take quite drastic action, such as banning birth control. So it's simply not an option.
Well, I think I'm going to give you 11 points for that final round, which brings us to the high score table. Let me refresh, and we'll find out. You're at the top. Oh. You are clear by 4 points of Prude in second place. Look at all these worthy competitors who you've destroyed.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
So well done, sir, and congratulations on your new. I need a title to give people who win the gauntlet.
I definitely want some sort of award.
You're not the last guest, so who knows?
Who's the next guest?
The next guest, I've actually got Daughter of Albion. I think might be next up.
She'll doubtless give you good answers as well. So.
Right. Great. Let's leave it there then.
Oh, thanks so much.